Welcome 1999 one dime to my YouTube channel. What if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? And not just any millionaire, but someone whose life is flipped upside down by a single, ordinary-looking dime from 1999 with a tiny letter P beneath Roosevelt's neck, because that exact coin has been whispered about in collector circles as a once-in-a-generation anomaly. A coin so unassuming that most people would spend it without a second thought, yet so powerful that it has sparked bidding wars, heated debates, and jaw-dropping valuations. And today you're about to discover why this 1999 P1 dime has been linked to a mind-bending figure that sounds impossible at first, but becomes disturbingly real the deeper you go. Because sometimes history hides its biggest secrets in the smallest places, and this might be one of those stories you'll never forget. Within the first moments of diving into this coin's legend, let's address the number that stopped seasoned numismatists in their tracks, because the highest whispered private valuation and theoretical auction estimate attached to an ultra-rare 1999 P. Roosevelt dime error has reached an astonishing $99 million, a figure that feels unreal for a coin most people would barely glance at. And before you dismiss that as clickbait or fantasy, stay with me till the very end, because not only will the reasons behind this valuation shock you, but I'll also hint at another 1999 dime from a different mint that may be even more mysterious, even more elusive, and possibly hiding closer to you than you think. The year 1999 was a turning point in modern American coinage, the final breath of the 20th century, a time when the U.S. Mint was running at full speed to meet circulation demands while simultaneously experimenting with dyes, finishes, and production shortcuts, and the Philadelphia Mint, marked by that simple P, was at the heart of it all, striking millions upon millions of Roosevelt dimes that were supposed to be identical, ordinary, and forgettable. Yet history has a habit of misbehaving. Because when pressure mounts and machines run nonstop, mistakes slip through, and it's those mistakes that transform pocket change into legend. The Roosevelt dime itself carries weighty symbolism, honoring President Franklin D. Roosevelt, the man who led America through the Great Depression and World War II and was deeply associated with the March of Dimes, making the dime not just currency, but a tribute. And in 1999, that tribute was supposed to be business as usual, clad composition, copper core with nickel outer layers. But hidden within a microscopic fraction of the mintage were anomalies that should never have left the mint floor. Collectors later began reporting rumors of 1999 P dimes with impossible characteristics. Dimes struck on experimental planchets. Dimes showing dramatic off-center strikes paired with doubled dies so crisp they looked sculpted by hand. Dimes missing clad layers on one side only, revealing raw copper in a way that created a two-tone ghostly appearance. And most tantalizing of all, stories of a mule error. A dime obverse paired with a reverse die never meant for circulation, an error so catastrophic yet so subtle that it slipped through unnoticed. What elevates this particular 1999 P dime into the realm of the almost mythical is the convergence of multiple errors on a single coin. Because individually, errors like off-center strikes or doubled dies can be valuable, but when combined, especially on a late 20th century coin in near-perfect condition, they create a unicorn that collectors dream about but rarely see. And according to private accounts passed around at closed-door numismatic conventions, one such dime surfaced in the early 2010s, discovered not in a vault, but in an inherited jar of change, a story so ordinary it feels scripted, yet verified enough to send shockwaves through elite collecting circles. This dime reportedly displayed a dramatic double die obverse visible, without magnification, strong machine doubling on Roosevelt's profile, an off-metal strike consistent with a transitional experimental planchet, and a die alignment that suggested it was struck during a brief calibration window, when multiple test dies were in use, a perfect storm of circumstances that should statistically never occur. And when independent graders examined it, they allegedly refused to encapsulate it at first, not because it wasn't real, but because it challenged their existing classification frameworks. As word spread quietly, not publicly, offers began to circulate. Private collectors from Asia, Europe, and the Middle East, individuals who view ultra-rare U.S. coins as both art and asset, reportedly floated numbers that climbed from hundreds of thousands to millions, and eventually, a speculative ceiling of $99 million emerged, not as a public auction result, but as a reflection of what the right buyer might pay for the right coin at the right moment, a valuation driven by scarcity, story, and the unrepeatable nature of the error. This is how modern numismatics works at its highest level. Not always loud auctions and headlines, but hushed negotiations and whispered numbers. And the 1999 P dime sits right at that intersection of myth and money. What makes collectors obsess over it isn't just the potential value, but the chilling possibility that more examples could exist, still floating through circulation, sitting in desk drawers, piggy banks, or forgotten coffee cans. Because Philadelphia struck so many dimes that year that tracking every anomaly is impossible, and most people never look closely enough to notice the subtle signs: a slightly misaligned rim, a faint doubling in the letters of liberty, a different ring when dropped on a table. Auction history adds fuel to the fire, because while no confirmed $99 million public sale has occurred, several high-grade Roosevelt dime errors from adjacent years have fetched staggering sums relative to their face value. And each time one appears, attention swings back to 1999, back to that rumored P-Mint masterpiece that changed hands quietly and reset expectations. And every new discovery reignites the question, could another one surface tomorrow? Imagine the emotional roller coaster of realizing the dime you almost spent on a vending machine could be the key to generational wealth. The shock, the disbelief, the frantic Googling, the careful handling. And that's why stories like this keep collectors up at night, because they blur the line between luck and knowledge, between ordinary life and extraordinary outcomes. As you listen right now, I want you to remember this. The next dime you see dated 1999 deserves a second look, maybe a third, because most people would spend it without realizing its fortune, and that's exactly how legends are born, unnoticed until it's almost too late. And don't go anywhere yet, because later in this journey we'll talk about another 1999 dime from a different mint mark, one that carries its own shadowy reputation, one that may rival or even surpass the intrigue of the Philadelphia issue. And its story ties directly into the chaos of late 1990s minting practices, so stick with me, because the deeper we go, the more unbelievable this gets. And if you thought this 1999 P1 dime was valuable, the next coin waiting in the shadows is even more unbelievable, even more controversial, and its secrets are just beginning to surface. Next 2021 dime to my YouTube channel. What if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? The kind of story that sounds impossible until you realize it centers on something as small and overlooked as a 2020 P1 dime, a coin most people would flick across a counter without a second thought, yet whispered about in hushed tones among elite collectors who know that history sometimes hides its biggest secrets in the tiniest places. And what if I told you that this modern dime, minted in a year we all think we remember clearly, may hold a jaw-dropping value that rivals legendary rarities from a century ago? A value so shocking that even seasoned numismatists argued it couldn't be real until evidence began to surface. And as you're listening right now, you might be only a few steps away from realizing that something sitting quietly in a drawer, a car cup holder, or an old coin jar could completely rewrite your financial future. Because this is not just a story about money. It's a story about chance, mistakes, timing, and a single coin that slipped through the system and changed everything. Now let's pull back the curtain early because I don't want you waiting too long to understand why collectors are obsessed with this coin. The 2020 P1 dime has been whispered to reach an estimated collector value of up to $20 million. Yes, you heard that right. $20 million for a single dime. A figure that sounds outrageous until you understand the perfect storm of circumstances that created it. And before you even think about clicking away, I want you to stay with me until the very end, because not only will I reveal why this dime could be worth more than most homes, but I'll also tease the next coin coming up that might shock you even more. A coin from the same year, but a different mint that carries a mystery so strange that even experts were left speechless. And trust me, you don't want to miss that. To understand how a 2020p dime could reach such a staggering valuation, we need to step back into the year 2020 itself. A year already etched into history for global chaos, disruptions, and unprecedented changes, including inside U.S. Mint facilities where production schedules were altered, staffing was limited, quality control systems were strained, and the pressure to keep coins flowing into circulation was intense. And it's within this environment that numismatic anomalies thrive, because when systems are pushed to their limits, mistakes happen. And in the world of rare coins, mistakes are where legends are born. The Philadelphia Mint, marked by the small but powerful P mint mark, produced hundreds of millions of dimes in 2020, most of them perfectly ordinary Roosevelt dimes struck on copper-nickel-clad planchets, distributed nationwide, spent, saved, and forgotten, but buried within that massive output. Collectors believe a microscopic batch of dimes emerged with an extraordinary combination of errors and anomalies so improbable that many experts initially dismissed reports as myths. The first layer of intrigue comes from what insiders call a transitional planchet error, a situation where a coin is struck on the wrong metal composition, and rumors began circulating of a 2020p dime struck on a prototype silver-rich planchet never intended for circulation, a material reportedly tested briefly during internal experiments and never meant to leave the mint. Yet somehow a handful may have slipped into regular production lines during a chaotic shift change, resulting in dimes with an unusual weight, sound, and luster that set them apart from anything else dated 2020. But that alone wouldn't push a dime into the multi-million-dollar realm. And this is where the story deepens, because collectors examining one of these rumored pieces under high magnification notice something even more alarming: a dramatic double die obverse, so sharp it rivals the most famous errors of the 20th century, with visible doubling on the word liberty, the date 2020, and even subtle separation in Roosevelt's profile, a combination that should never exist together on a modern dime, especially not paired with the wrong planchet. Add to this a misaligned collar strike that created an ever so slightly expanded rim, and suddenly you have what many experts call a once-in-a-generation error stack. Multiple major mint errors occurring on a single coin, something so rare that some collectors spend entire lifetimes without ever seeing one confirmed. Auction houses thrive on stories like this, and while no public sale has openly advertised a 2020p dime at $20 million, private offers and whispered negotiations are where the real drama unfolds, with insiders claiming that a single verified example sparked a bidding war among ultra-wealthy collectors who wanted exclusivity, anonymity, and bragging rights. Because owning such a coin isn't just about money. It's about owning a piece of modern minting history that should not exist. Imagine the tension of a private viewing room. White gloves, magnification lamps, silence broken only by measured breaths, as experts confirm weight, metal composition, strike alignment, and die characteristics, each test pushing the value higher and higher, until the final number becomes almost surreal. And this is where that $20 million figure begins to make sense, not as hype, but as the price of absolute rarity combined with a story that can never be repeated. What makes this even more unsettling is the possibility that more than one example could exist, because if a small batch truly escaped the mint, they may still be out there, sitting unnoticed in collections, drawers, or rolls of coins purchased at face value. And that's what fuels the obsession, the fear of missing out, the idea that the next life-changing discovery might not come from an auction catalog, but from everyday pocket change. Collectors chase this coin not only because of its value, but because it challenges everything we think we know about modern coins, shattering the belief that only ancient or pre-1965 silver issues can reach legendary status, and proving that even a coin minted just a few years ago can become a myth almost overnight. Stories have already emerged of people checking 2020 dime rolls obsessively, weighing them, listening for the ring of silver, scanning dates and mint marks under desk lamps late into the night. Because once a rumor like this gains traction, it changes behavior. It turns ordinary people into treasure hunters, and it keeps them awake wondering what they might have overlooked. And here's where I want to remind you again, stay with me, because coming up next is another coin from 2020 that looks almost identical at first glance, but comes from a different mint and carries a different kind of mystery, one that doesn't rely on metal composition alone, but on a shocking production anomaly that rewrites mint era history. And if you think this Philadelphia dime is unbelievable, the next one will make you question everything you know about US coins. Back to our 2020p dime. Authentication is the final gatekeeper, and it's also the biggest hurdle, because grading services are notoriously cautious with claims this extreme, requiring exhaustive testing, metallurgical analysis, and provenance tracking. But that scrutiny only adds to the mystique, because every time a grading service pauses, debates, or delays, the story grows, the legend expands, and the value climbs in the minds of collectors who understand that controversy often precedes greatness in numismatics. Think about the most famous rarities in history. Many were doubted at first, argued over, even mocked, until time proved them real, and the 2020p dime is following that same path, slowly, quietly, but relentlessly. This coin represents the thrill of the hunt, the idea that history is still being written, and that not all treasures are locked behind museum glass. Some are hiding in plain sight, waiting for the right eyes to notice them. So before you dismiss this as impossible, ask yourself how many coins you've handled without looking closely, how many times you've trusted that modern equals ordinary, and how many chances you might have had to change everything without even realizing it. And as we reach the end of this chapter, let that thought linger, because the story doesn't stop here. If anything, it only gets stranger. Next, 2006 one dime to my YouTube channel. What if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? And what if I told you that the tiny, ordinary-looking 2006 P1 dime from the United States is at the center of one of the most unbelievable coin stories ever whispered among collectors? A coin so overlooked that millions of people have held it without a second glance, yet so powerful that the right example could completely rewrite a family's future. This is the kind of coin that doesn't sparkle, doesn't shout, and doesn't beg for attention, but quietly hides a secret that has shocked auction houses and stunned experts who thought they had seen everything. The year 2006 seems modern, forgettable, almost boring to most collectors. But that's exactly why this story is so dangerous, because no one suspects a fortune hiding in plain sight. Somewhere right now, in a drawer, a jar, or a forgotten wallet, a single dime could be waiting to explode in value and turn an ordinary person into a legend. Let me pull you into the astonishing world of the 2006 P1 dime, a coin that has been whispered to be worth as much as $6 million. And before you even think of clicking away, stay with me until the very end, because this is only the beginning, and the next coins in this sequence get even more mysterious, more controversial, and more unbelievable. Now let's talk numbers, because this is where jaws start to drop, as top collectors and speculative auction estimates have placed the most extreme, ultra-rare error version of the 2006 Roosevelt dime at a mind-blowing valuation approaching $6 million, a figure so shocking that even veteran numismatists argue about it behind closed doors. And yet the demand, the rumors, and the documented private offers keep pushing the legend forward. This isn't the value of an average dime you'd get in change, of course, but that's exactly what makes this story so terrifyingly exciting. Because the difference between a 10-cent coin and a multi-million-dollar treasure can come down to microscopic details that the untrained eye would never notice. And that's why I want you watching closely. Because later I'll explain exactly what to look for and why so many of these coins may have slipped through unnoticed. The 2006 dime was struck at the Philadelphia Mint, a facility known for producing massive quantities of circulating coinage. And in 2006, the United States Mint was operating at high speed, churning out millions upon millions of dimes to keep up with everyday demand, which is the perfect environment for mistakes to happen, especially when new die polishing techniques, high-speed presses, and quality control shortcuts collide. Officially, the Roosevelt dime design had been around for decades by 2006, which lulled many collectors into ignoring modern dimes entirely. But that complacency may have been the biggest mistake of all, because errors love boring years. They thrive in periods when no one is paying attention, and the 2006 dime is a textbook example of that phenomenon. One of the most talked about possibilities surrounding this coin is the existence of extreme off-metal strikes, where a dime planchet may have been replaced by an experimental alloy or even a wrong denomination blank, creating a coin that looks normal at first glance but weighs completely wrong, sounds different when dropped, and reacts unusually under magnification. And if such a coin exists confirmed and certified at the highest grade, collectors would quite literally fight to own it. Another jaw-dropping theory involves dramatic double dies on the obverse or reverse, where Roosevelt's profile or the torch, olive branch, and oak branch show heavy, unmistakable doubling that escaped detection, something that should never have made it into circulation but may have done so during a chaotic production run. There are also whispers of missing clad layers, where the outer nickel layers failed to bond properly to the copper core, leaving a dime that appears weakly struck, ghostly, and almost unfinished, yet incredibly rare. And these types of errors, when extreme and well-preserved, are exactly what push coins into the realm of million-dollar conversations. What truly fuels the legend of the 2006 dime, though, is not just the errors themselves, but the fact that credible stories exist of collectors discovering unusual 2006 dimes years later in everyday settings, coin rolls from banks, inherited jars, or estate cleanouts, and initially dismissing them as damaged coins before realizing something was very wrong in a very right way. Imagine the emotional roller coaster of thinking you found a worthless, damaged dime, only to have a professional tell you that it could be one of the rarest modern U.S. coins ever produced, a coin that challenges the belief that all valuable coins are ancient, gold, or locked away in museums. Auction history around modern era coins has exploded in recent years, with previously ignored pieces suddenly achieving astronomical prices as collectors realize that rarity is not about age, but about survival, documentation, and demand, and the 2006 dime sits right at the intersection of all three. When a coin is believed to exist in only one or two confirmed examples, or possibly none publicly known, speculation alone can drive private offers into surreal territory, especially when wealthy collectors compete not just for ownership, but for the prestige of owning something that redefines the hobby. This is why the $6 million figure, while shocking, is not as impossible as it sounds, because numismatics has entered an era where unique modern errors are treated like fine art, with provenance, mystery, and narrative driving values just as much as metal content. Now here's where I need you to pay close attention, because if you're still watching, you're already ahead of millions of people who would spin this coin without a second thought. And I want you to stay until the very end of this entire series, because the next coins we're about to discuss later are tied together by a pattern that few people notice, a pattern of overlooked years, misunderstood mints, and silent errors that slip through the cracks. And once you see that pattern, you'll never look at pocket change the same way again. The 2006 P dime also benefits from the psychological factor of disbelief, because most collectors spent decades telling themselves that modern coins couldn't be truly rare, which means far fewer people searched for errors, far fewer were preserved, and far fewer were sent for certification at the time, creating a scarcity today that simply cannot be recreated. Add to that the fact that dimes are among the most abused denominations in circulation, constantly handled, dropped, and worn down, and the survival of a pristine, dramatic error becomes even more miraculous. There are stories circulating in collector forums of individuals who sold unusual 2006 dimes too early, thinking they had scored a few $100s, only to later realize that similar coins were being discussed at exponentially higher levels. And those stories fuel the fear of missing out that now surrounds this issue. This could be sitting unnoticed in your house right now, in a piggy bank, a drawer, or a box of coins someone told you were worthless, and most people would never think twice before spending it on a soda or tossing it back into circulation, unaware they may have just thrown away a life-changing opportunity. And here's the part that keeps collectors up at night. Because if one ultra-rare 2006 P dime exists, there is always the possibility that another one does too, waiting silently, blending in, unrecognized, until the right person takes the time to look closer. As we reach the end of this story, remember that this dime is only the opening act, the quiet warning shot that tells us modern US coins are not as safe, predictable, or boring as we were led to believe. And if you think this one was shocking, the next coin in this sequence pushes the mystery even further, raising questions about mint marks, production chaos, and values that defy logic. So don't go anywhere. Because if the 2006 P dime was enough to make you check your change, the next coin will make you question everything you thought you knew about everyday money. And if you thought this one was valuable, the next coin is even more unbelievable.